Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Tuesday, October 1st. As today's date, this video was way ahead of time. I just had a voiceover I wanted to do because I had a really, as I slept late today and had interesting dreams and good meditation. And so I wanted to talk about how small we are as human beings. You know, if you think about grains of sand on the beach or in the desert, and our planet being one of those grains of sand in a universal type situation, immense universe that there is, and then there's the etheric universe, which is, you know, in some ways even bigger, because like even your internal universe, what's inside of you, is bigger than the material universe in terms of the vast amount of, I mean, just think about all the things that go on inside a human being, like all the your imagination and your thought, you know, your ability to think about things, and you know, it's I mean, all the ideas that, if you look at all the books and all the movies and things that are there, and all the things that are created, video games and whatever it might be, through the internal process, the creative process of a human being, right? You think about all the AI and all the data that's created, all the data that's on the internet. I mean, the information and ideas that are on planet Earth are much bigger than the planet, right? They expand through, you know, I mean, all the, you know, all these various levels. And then we're just scratching the surface on our spiritual abilities, our abilities to, you know, our vast inner universe. Our internal world is much bigger than just who we are. We have all the people who have influenced us, you know, our parents, our siblings, our friends, our enemies, you know, all the things that we've seen, all the stuff we've seen on TV, all of our experiences. I mean, just the amount of memory storage that we have, and, you know, the internalization of other people, the internalization of pets that we've loved and their essence, and you know, how we remember them, and like how they made us feel, and you know, how they made us, what they were, you know, like to be around. We have a whole lifetime of experiences, and now with the information age and computers, and you know, the amount of data that people come across, and just you know, it's magnified. And so, you know, people's internal universes are vast, and it's more than just about a singular person. So when you think about you know, the idea of a grain of a sand in our planet being, you know, just a grain in the sand of a vast, you know, beach of universal, and something like if our whole planet was grains of sand, you know, it would be not even a representation of how big the universe is compared to our singular planet. And then you think about like ants, or small creatures like flies, and you know, things that we kill on a regular basis, things that are, you know, we're like, oh, that's so insignificant. Like if you think about you know, an ant colony that's maybe it's like, I don't know, fire ants or something like that, and you know, you put some poison on it, or you dump some vinegar or whatever, hot water, you do something to kill all of them, and they're a whole vast civilization there, right? Like there's, you know, a minute civilization, all the rodents and things, you know, you put out pesticides, or people, you know, kill these creatures without thinking about it. You go to build a house, and you dig up all these homes, all these, you know, you go into an environment, like they build some, you know, it's a wooded area, and they go and they kill all these trees, all the, you know, all these plant lives, all the plant, like trees are not even, you think about something living like an ant or a mouse, but you have these massive trees that are, you know, they have their own consciousness and their own, you know, their own right to be, right, their own right to live, and you know, they're just insignificant. You cut them down, you use the wood for whatever purposes, you know, make some freaking piece of something or another, or you just throw it in a, you know, a wood burning stove, and you know, to heat your house or whatever it might be, right? Turn it into toilet paper or something. All these trees are just cut down, and then, you know, all the life forms of the, you know, ecosystem and the environments that's there, and you know, in the area, and you dig it all up, you kill everything that's on there, you displace all the the creatures, right? Because they're insignificant to you. You have dominion over the earth because you're a human being, and you're so much bigger and greater than them, and they have no idea of themselves or an idea of a soul. They have no sovereignty, and they're just here for your, for you to dispose of at your pleasure, right? The pleasure of the president. We're the king of the beasts, and we can just get rid of all kinds of animal life indiscriminately. And other than a few, not all that enforceable environmental laws and things that have come about, we've just wiped out one creature after another effing creature, right? Just these animals that are extinct because of human civilization. Like, we've extincted stuff. We've got rid of whole species of creatures. Like, we've just killed all kinds of things. We have an oil spill, and it just, destroys the whole, all these animals in the ocean or wherever it might be, in these ways that we just negatively affect the world. And we have these nuclear weapons that could wipe out pretty much every creature on the planet, right? So, we have, this idea that we're somehow so much greater and bigger and better, and we're at the top of the sort of consciousness chain, and we have the abilities, God-given abilities, to harvest whatever was around us, like this, like a, like we can do whatever we want to the land and the creatures that inhabit it, because they're small and they're nothing compared to us, and we're so much greater than them, right? And if you think about it like that, what if they're creatures that look at us like that, right? Alien beings or disembodied souls, that are, they see the, insignificant of human life. Like, most of the stuff that we do has no real significance, no real, and our ability to make garbage, right? I often tell that story. The third master of the Sajmark system would tell this story that, in the disciple-guru condition, relationship, in ancient India, it's a kind of a thing, and now maybe less or so now. But if a disciple went to a guru, the guru would ask for a guru dakshina, which was some sort of gift, like some sort of, tribute to the guru for accepting him as his disciple. And so this young man went to this, like, famous, guru, teacher, spiritual master, whatever it was, and said to him, I want to be your disciple. He said, well, you have to get me a guru dakshina. And he said, okay, what do you want? He said, well, bring me something that's the worst thing in the world. And so the kid goes out, and he just sees one bad thing after another, and he can't decide, because he goes, well, that thing's bad, but this thing seems worse. And so he's like, I'm never going to find the worst thing in the world. And so then he's pooping, and he realizes, he looks at the poop, he goes, well, you're the worst thing in the world. And he reaches down to take the poop to bring it to his guru, and the poop says, what are you doing? And he says, well, in this, story, poop can talk. And he says, well, my guru wants me to, my prospective guru wants me to bring the worst thing in the world, and you're it. And he goes, what are you talking about? The poop says, before I met you, I was birthday cake. I was an apple. I was, a candy bar. I was, kale or whatever. So, and he said, you've turned me into this. Like, I was something great, and this is what you've made me into, right? And so the disciple realizes what this is about, and he goes to the guru and says, I'm bringing you the worst thing in the world. And the guru said, oh yeah, what is it? He goes, it's me. And he goes, yeah. He says, I'll accept you as my disciple. And so this, kind of attitude of humility, right, that needs to be there, that people think they're so great and so significant. Like, these clowns running for president, and, all the people behind them, and all these things, it's just, it's not only just space, what we're talking about in terms of the creation of the universe, but it's also time. There's time, and like the vastness of the universal creation in our internal worlds, but it's also time. Time is a very specific moment in, quadrillions of years of time that's there, right? And so time is also important, because your whole life is your whole life, but your moments many of them are insignificant, and it's a small blip of time. Like, people think that You know, they can be so great, but it's confined by time, right? Your greatness, your momentary greatness, is confined to a vast, long experience of, you know, not just the vastness of space, but the vastness of all the time that's available, like all the things that have happened. You know, there's all these things, civilizations that we don't even know about. The majority of great civilizations, some of them more advanced. I mean, if you look at the pyramids, you can understand this. And who's to say the pyramids are the greatest thing ever created? You know, like, that's just what we have on Earth. Like, we can't duplicate the pyramids. There was a civilization that was more advanced than us that left the pyramids, right? And they're only, you know, 5,000-10,000 years old or whatever it is, and whatever, you know, length of time they were. And so there's been other vast civilizations that have been lost just on this planet. And so, like, we don't know about any of that shit, right? We don't know about, like, all the things that the true history of the Earth. We have no idea. There's some, you know, remnants, some dinosaur bones, things that they don't tell you, giant skeletons or whatever. There's all these things that they don't tell you about. They're like giant human giants, you know, like there's all these things that they've hidden, you know, all this, you know, forbidden archaeology, that there's been people around planet Earth like long before they say that people got here. The whole Cro-Magnon thing, the whole Darwin evolution thing, they know that's bullshit. They have the evidence to crush that theory. And so just time on planet Earth, never mind the whole creation of the universe and the vastness of time and space, right? So I'm saying this because there's a lot to be gained from realizing how small or insignificant you are. I remember as a kid, and, you know, of course now even as an adult, walking into the ocean when it was, you know, slightly wavy, you know, not a hurricane certainly, or, you know, just storm, and the vastness of the ocean, how the water just slapped you around, like you could be the biggest, strongest person. And, you know, when you walk out of the ocean, you walk like a little kid getting pushed around by the power of the ocean, right? Like even small waves, but like bigger waves. And how it's, you just look out when you're in the ocean, you're on the shore, and you look out and you can't see anything, you know, just the curvature, the slight curve. You just can't see very, you know, it's just so vast. Even some of these, you know, Great Lakes and things where you can't see anything on the other side, right? Like you know, your vision doesn't even go to the end of the thing. And then deserts and forests and things like this, or, you know, mountaintops, and you know, you're on these places where you can't, you just can't see, you know, like you're in a mountain range and you're climbing a mountain or a hill, and you just look out and it's just all, you know, you see how big the planet is, right? When you're looking down at it from an airplane. And, you know, you see how, you know, I mean, it's just how small, like you know, a populated area is. And you see how big the Earth is, how vast the oceans are. And then you look up into the stars and see space and things. And understanding your insignificance is important, because we do have something serious to do here, something to accomplish. In terms of our lives, our decisions are important, and what we do with our lives is important. But over the grand scheme of things, it's not. Like, it's, you know, we can all negatively affect the environment. We can make the world a better place. I mean, there's things that we can do. Collectively, people are, you know, fucking the earth over right now, so that's bad. But in terms of, you know, our overall influence, we're not that special. We're not that great. Like, we're not that important. And the events that make up our life, our day-to-day lives, like, just aren't all that serious. They're not. Like, they're not that, you know, they're not. I mean, you think even, like, we die, we live, what difference does it make in terms of the, yeah, to us personally, we feel we want to survive, but so are the ants you just stepped on. Like, you could just be walking and be stepping on shit like you do. Like, how many times you stepped on things, right? And killed them just by walking on them, like bugs or whatever it is, right? And, you know, so, or we're driving, like, things you're hitting. You know, I mean, it shows you how many insects, like, are not, you know, we've killed all these insects through pesticides. We almost wiped out the bees, you know, recently, which would have been a real frickin' tragedy for, you know, the planet, and, you know, whatever it is. But when we used to drive, you look at your grill of your car, and, like, you know, we take a long car trip, And there's so many dead bugs there, right? Just things that you're driving into and all this stuff that would get absorbed and would be stuck in your radiator, right? Like it's just, all these tiny little bugs, all these things that are happening. People breathing in, small microscopic, creatures that are being killed and things. And there's beings, there's, evolved beings or whatever it is, either etherically or, physical creatures that have far exceeded what our consciousness and our understanding, all the stuff that we have as human beings. And so looking at us, like you think about some aliens that take you up and stick a probe in your ass, right? Like, dump you back down on Earth, right? Like they're, it's just, there's always something more evolved than you. And that's one of the things that they've kept the idea of UFOs and, etheric life, even more importantly, beings that have evolved past the physical levels of existence, but are, still alive in an etheric level. Our souls, being the potential for that, the greatness of the full manifestation of our souls, where we become etheric beings that are, conscious and are, are a different life form. And so, people think about angels and things like this. And so there's all this stuff that's out there. And, each of those beings, the universe will survive without you and thrive without you. Will not even notice that you're gone, right? People around you, the more people that know you, sure, whatever, that's, you're a famous person. But they don't really know you. But the people who know you, love you, right? You die and, well, it's significant. Like they mourn you, depending on what kind of person you were. And, a lot of times people die and it's like, oh my God, I'm so glad that fucking guy's gone, right? I mean, I kind of felt that about, my parents to whatever extent. Not my mom so much, but my dad certainly. I mean, it's just, they didn't, like nobody really missed them. They weren't missed. They weren't essential to anybody's lives. But, you have people that die in your life that just, you mourn and it's significant to those people, but your life goes on, right? And certainly the universe doesn't stop. The world doesn't stop because somebody died, right? And, people who are famous that die, yeah, more people know about, like the Queen of England, but nobody, you don't know the person she was. Like, it's just, even the people around her probably didn't. She's only significant because of her position. And even then, who cares? Like, who really cares? So, they have these big, grandiose funerals. Everybody forgets about it. Just like everybody, when somebody dies, there is a period of mourning. There's a period of where you remember people. And then there's a period where, that just, once in a while you think of somebody and, it's just there. There's a person who does the Sajmarg meditation. And I knew her and her husband from gatherings. I would see them. Her husband was sort of a saintly looking person, really seemed like a nice guy. Her I didn't know so much. And they had a son they used to bring to gatherings, like a young kid. And they had a daughter who I never really saw. She was maybe like 10 years older than the kid brother or something. And she died when she was 25. And I know this because the woman posted it on Facebook like every day. Like I didn't go on Facebook and I would see it. Like every time I went on Facebook, she was posting about her dead daughter, right? Which, people do. And she did it, though, for like 3 years, like to the point where she changed her profile picture, was usually a picture of her daughter, and she just, she couldn't get over it, right? And, she was one of the many people that I unfriended when, I went through a whole divorce thing and the whole, where I was being ostracized. And so I, didn't really know this person. I just unfriended all these people who were, part of this kind of group, right? But every once in a while, like Facebook will recommend that we be friends. It hasn't happened in a while. And if I clicked on her profile, I would see she's still talking about her daughter. Like I bet if I found her profile today, she would have posts about her daughter, right? And it's probably been 15 years or, whatever. It's been a long time, like, over a decade. And I know that, like, people would write comments to her because it's a horrible thing, like, what I went through with my daughter's suicide. I mean, it's a horrible thing to lose a kid. But this girl was 25 years old, and I'm not sure what happened. Like, I don't even know. just know that she was posting all the time. And then there, with people who would be posting and saying, "Oh, she was wonderful. She was so wonderful." But if you post every day for 10 years about the same thing, right? Like, people start to worry about you because you haven't been able to move on, and she won't be able to. Like, she's crushed by this thing, right? And I can understand the significance of the pain of something like that, right? But it's, people are supposed to move on because that happens. Death's a part of life, and, all these things, right? But the whole too big to fail, this idea that these banks who were, criminal in nature, and what they did was they lent money out to people which they knew were bad loans, right? The subprime mortgages, these loans that they, the irresponsible loans. But even the prime loans, like the subprime loans, everyone knew were shit, right? But even the prime loans were bad. And then they packaged these loans up and sold them to other institutions so they would be able to have this, debt on their books where they would be, income they were supposed to receive. But the people who lent these loans knew that they were shit and sold them off. And people figured this out and started to bet against these loans. So you had loans that couldn't be paid, so they were worthless loans. But now they were, there was another level of debt, which was these credit default swaps. And so it's so vast, it eclipses our gross national product, which is $20 trillion. There was $250 billion worth of, some banks had $200 trillion. The gross national product of America was only 20. And that's, all the stuff we make. That's real stuff, right? And then, of course, the stock market and these other things. That's just imaginary wealth that people think they have until it disappears, right? They take it away from you because they say it has no value. You think you have all this money, and then the company goes tits up, and then, all the value you have in stocks and all the things that they've done, all this, whatever it is. These banks are insolvent. So these banks made really bad financial decisions. And banks are supposed to be the bean counters that, when you go to get a loan, they're like, they're dream crushers, right? Like, you think you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to get money from a bank, and they're going to, all the stuff, right, that goes along with that. And so you think you're going to, make this, get this money from the bank, and it's going to change your life, and you're going to become someone on Shark Tank or some shit like that, right? And you're going to be a multi-millionaire business person, entrepreneur. And the bank goes, yeah, you can't pay back this loan. We're not going to give it to you. They're supposed to be that guy, that dream crusher that, crunches the numbers and sees that, your dream isn't worth betting on, right? And they weren't that way at all. They were irresponsibly loaning everybody who wanted to buy a house, and created this, this whole real estate bubble, which then collapsed. Of course, real estate is essential because land is always the primary value. What has primary value, and potential for development, and just land is a real thing as opposed to cash. And because of these bad financial decisions, that would, any business that made these decisions, $200 trillion of this kind of bad debt, of these liabilities for these banks. And they said, well, these banks are too big to fail because of this. We can't erase all this debt and pretend it's worthless, because then the whole economy would collapse. Because this debt, this promise to pay, is more than the whole. If you're only collecting $4 trillion in taxes, and the national debt, which is extraordinary, is in 30 trillion, or back then probably 16 trillion, whatever it was. $10 trillion. And then you have banks that have $200 trillion. If that bank goes bust, then all that, what does it just disappear? Like, people think they're owed that money. All these people think they have money, all this way that this is owed. These insurance companies that insure banks, they all collapse. The whole thing collapses, the whole economy. And they say it was too big to fail, but there's nothing too big to fail. Because, this was imaginary. This was debt. It wasn't even wealth. And it's imaginary. It doesn't even really exist. It's just, an idea of vastness of, fortunes that are just ideas, like people's, debt is ideas, people's wealth is ideas. It's not really anything. It's just, now it's just in cyber worlds, it's in these computers, your net worth and things, the value, Bitcoin, all this stuff. It's just ideas that are in their computers. It doesn't have any physical, tangible reality. It doesn't exist in the physical world. It used to exist just on paper, now exists in computers. And so, how is that too big to fail? It doesn't even exist, right? There's nothing too big to fail. And so America can disappear and the Earth will be better off, right? The whole, all these civilizations, every government, it can go away. And, the damage we're doing to the planet and the entitlements we have and our arrogance and, all these things that we have are a part of that. You can go with it, right? Because we're just insignificant. It's just not, not just in terms of our size compared to the vastness of the planet, the oceans, all the things that I've said, but also the insignificance of 70 years, and when we're talking about quadrillions of years of time, right? Like we haven't even be able to measure time because we don't know when the universe will implode back on itself, right? After the original creation, when it went from nothing to something, and it goes back from something to nothing. And that's so long, the vastness of time, that we can't even comprehend what that is, right? And so, insignificance. So there's another piece to this. So if you think about all the things that seemed important in your past, in that word, like things that you worried about, things that you thought were going to be better than they were, things that were disappointment, things that you stressed about, things that you focus on, like people who become workaholics and neglect their marital partners or something like this, right? They have things that are more important than their relationships, and then that people leave them, and then they find out the thing that they were obsessed with or their job wasn't all that important, and they feel lonely and they wish they had made different choices. They had put more effort into other things, right? So there's, people have these realizations in the past, of things in the past. If you think back, everyone can think back about something that really stressed them out or really, consumed them in some way or another. And now it seems so insignificant, right? Things that they were mad at, things that they hated in other people. Like people have these, beefs with other people where they, wish the other person was dead, and they were, all the negativity and hatred that's there. And then years later, they can talk to the people like nothing happened. It's just water under the bridge. It's nothing that, happened seems so big or important now, right? So that's the other aspect of it. That, this is an aspect of time where time takes away the intensity of something and its significance, right? All the trauma you suffered over some things that were insignificant. So that's the other piece to this, right? And so I want to talk about what is important, like what, I mean, not in the sense of, in the smallness of our existence, what's important, but there's a whispers of the brighter world, these channeled messages in the Sizemore system. I want to read one here. I gotta find it. Here it is. That is not it. Here it is here. So this says Monday, August 2nd, 1999, 8 a.m. This period of question and concern about future events will get minds working. Some will draw positive conclusions. They will better understand the transitory side of life and the fact that there is no time to waste in trivialities. Those who are ready will see it that way. Many others will continue in the same vein without changing their habits in the least. This is kind of what I've been talking about here. It says, these moments in existence when a person can question themselves, review their past, what they have done, what they have not done, and decide in the final analysis to adopt a new way of life, thinking a little differently by realizing the frailty of their own being and all that surrounds them. If they realize even the slightest bit the grandeur of the universe, of the mechanisms that govern it, of this power that they cannot describe with poor words, what they are so small in relation to its immensity. What are they so small in its relation to this immensity? Nothing or very little. Whether they exist or not, what difference does it make in the vast program? If they realize this, even for a moment, they will perhaps leave behind their overweening ambition, if such is the case, and their high opinion of themselves, and possibly return to more humility. That would be for them the beginning of wisdom. Babaji. Babaji is the second master of the Sage-Mark system. And so that brings me to the the important part about this. There are two things here, in terms of making the right decision, which is ultimately really important for you specifically, for me, personally, and then collective, making the divine decision. Not going off and making mistakes and indulging in things that only lead to, misery and a disconnect and loneliness and, all the negative things. But the other piece is when you serve God, like understanding that, you're a slave in one way or another, and I've talked about this in many videos. Your body is a slave to water and food and air, right? And so there is a survival mechanism in your body, a fear of dying, a fear of, that like there's something that keeps you going, which is built into the physical life, right? And let's say you haven't had water in 3 days, and you feel like you're dying of thirst, you have a headache, you're suffering from dehydration, and someone comes along with a bottle of water, and there's no other water available, supply and demand. You'll give up everything. You'll pay them $1 million for it, right? If you don't get that water, you're gonna die, right? Like anything, food. I mean, somebody shoves you under the water, you're being waterboarded or something, and you feel like you're gonna drown, just for a little bit of oxygen. You'll give up millions of dollars or whatever you had, right? Whatever it'll take so that you can get, all of a sudden, something that was so freely given, having water and air is so, it's just there for you. If you're deprived of that, your physical body, the panic that you undergo and the desperation you'll have for having that, you'll pay them whatever it is, right? Because we're slaves. Our physical body is built in with, when you're starving to death or you're dehydrated or you don't have the ability to breathe. I mean, you'll give anything for that, right? Because your life is more important. Like when the realization of your life, if you have any kind of these near-death experiences where you almost, like you've ever been, diving in the ocean or diving in a pool or something, and you really need to breathe, and you're trying to get up to the surface of the water, and your lungs are heaving, but you don't want to breathe in the water, right? And then when you break the surface and you take a big gasp of air, it's like heaven, even though you can't feel it. It's not pleasurable like eating or some of these other things, right? Some of the biological urges that you have, sexual urges, people throw away their whole lives because of these types of things, right? The physical slavery that you have to your body and its demands and its needs and things. You're a slave to your stomach, you're a slave to your lungs, you're a slave to your sexual impulses, you're a slave, all these things, right? People are, find that there's bondage there, right? It makes you do things. It's used against you, right? That's why they use sexuality and food and these things and cravings in advertising, right? Because they know it works, like to target people based in these things. You see this with people with addictions, right? People who will throw away their lives. They give you the drugs away for free in the beginning, and then you'll pay immense amounts of money. I worked at this like a treatment center for really rich people, like in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Like sort of famous people from rich families, people with a lot of money went there. It was like a place for people with addictions. And part of my job was to pick people up at the airport, and it was, a bizarre situation because people would come in completely fucked up, like, on drugs, and I'd have to bring them to the hospital and these things. But there was a woman I was supposed to pick up, and she was a judge and a pillar in the community of some city, like somebody who was semi-famous, and she was married, had kids, and had like a successful life. And she just started smoking crack, and within 2 months she had blown through all of her money and all of her savings, and she was, her husband was divorcing her, and she was prostituting herself for crack, like she was, became a prostitute, right? Someone who was like a judge, somebody who was like, in a like elite level person. And she didn't get off the plane. She never got on the plane. Like, I'm just sitting there waiting for her. She didn't, because she was a crackhead. And like, this is the nature of our slavery, right? People are slaves to their, their physical urges and their, they're, all these things I've just said. And so understanding that relationship, the only good form of slavery is to be a slave to God, to work for God. And when you work for God and you're doing God's work, then you become, I don't want to say important because everybody's replaceable, but you have a significant role to play or whatever in the divine creation, especially since there's so few people who are willing to surrender and work for God even partially. Really do it, not just some bullshit religious thing, but really connect to God and submit to the divine authority and be willing to be used as a conduit for the divine energy and things like this. And so that's where your life would have some significance. Not that you're more important or you're special, you're better, but you're willing to make the world a better place, which most people aren't. And then you have a position in the divine universe where you're functioning as a like a healthy, proper, appropriate person, an essence, an entity where you're functioning in a way to help with the greater good. And that's like the only choice where there's now it becomes a significant life that you have, right? Like all your lives of going the wrong direction, all your lives of just building some scars and addictions and mistakes and egotistical behaviors. Now you've surrendered your your all of it, your self-importance, your arrogance, your ability to choose the wrong thing, and you're going to be part of the solution, or part of the the solution that already exists. Anyways, I thought I'd put that out there. Let's get on with the other stuff here. Okay, so today is Wednesday, October 2nd, and I'm uploading the debate video as we speak. There's been a couple developments on Iran and Israel. Israel's kicked the UN out of their country, says the Secretary General of the UN is no longer welcome there. And then there was a pundit there talking about, well, Israel's totally justified by the way they've been treated unfairly by the Secretary General because they haven't condemned Iran. And so let's go back to this. This is a very telling video. One of the most important sort of truther iconic moments. This is Wesley Clark, who was the Joint Chiefs of Staff under Clinton. And we know this all to be true because it happened afterwards. This is about him dealing with the neocons. And he visited the Pentagon, and he ran for president too. And I like this guy because he was ex-military, and he was fairly reasonable. He didn't get any sort of a run. But he was, he seemed like he was one of the better candidates, given all the crap. But this is a moment of truth here.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon, and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So,
remember when they proposed to go to war with Iraq, and I was like, I wasn't a truther like I am now. And I was like, well, that's fucked. Like, I knew that was messed up because it made no sense, right? And it was clear that they wanted to do that for a while. It was part of an agenda, and they were given the opportunity because of big, September, a big event in September, right? 9/11. And so, it didn't make any sense, right?
I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to...
Now, that's not, we know that they had this agenda because he's going to talk about it here. There was the neocon agenda, and they were going in and they needed a catalyst, which I believe they provided, and you can check out my video on my Apocalypse Laughs Now channel, which, you know, describes what that catalyst was, the big event, 2001, the 9/11 event. But regardless of what you think about that event, or anybody thinks about that event, they clearly used that event to go into these various countries, at least 4 of these countries, right? We'll show you in a second here.
I see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
So, if you think about all those countries that are listed here, there's another one here I can show you. So we know they went into Iraq. They tried to go into Syria, right? They, you know, they didn't do anything with Libya, Lebanon, and they destroyed Libya, right? So, and of course Afghanistan. And so, but the big thing here was when he said finishing off with
Iran,
because that is the big one, right? There was always, Iran was the biggest one, right? That was always the big chip. If you hear any of these guys talking, John Bolton, any of the big neocons, their goal was always to go after Iran. But if you look at the map, so they have kind of a deal with the King of Jordan, right? You don't hear much problems with the border between Israel and Jordan. But they're going in Lebanon right now, right? Here was Iraq over here, and then on the other side of that is Iran. So all this area, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, were part of that agenda. They tried to get Syria, and Russia blocked them. They got Iraq, and Jordan's already pretty much compromised, and right now they're going after Lebanon. And so this is a huge part. Like if they, you know, if Iraq is, you know, occupied by America, then they have that, and then, you know, they get Iran, who's what was over here, right? There's Iran here. So this is a major, you know, Iran has all these, it has all this oil-rich country, all these things, and they want to take down Iran. And they're talking about all these strategic bombings. I told you about the oil fields in my last video that Lindsey Graham, that, you know, he's a neocon piece of shit, and he wants either us, it would have to be us, or it would have to be you know, Israelis to bomb the oil refineries, which would cause chaos to all the people who are getting oil from there, and, you know, crippling their country's economy, and the starvation of the citizens. Again, that's like economic sanctions. And so we've already fucked Iran over with Operation Ajax years ago, which the CIA admitted to, which I talk about quite often. And so this is a country that's been victimized. Of course, Afghanistan's over here. And so they went into all these various countries, and now Lebanon is being attacked by Israel. So here they want to get Sudan, and I'll find Somalia here. And Somalia. So Somalia is a messed up country, of course, the pirates, but this is a very strategic country because of the coastal land here, right? And there's all this oil in Yemen, right? These other countries. But Sudan is right here with Egypt. So if they really want to get Egypt, they've gotten Libya, right? So they've got Sudan, Libya. So Egypt's boxed in. So it'd be only a matter of time before they would crumble Egypt. Then you'd be looking more at this map here, right, where they could get Egypt. What if they could get all of Egypt, right? They took all of Egypt. They got Syria, this part of Iraq, Saudi Arabia, right? This is Greater Israel. Then they have to take these other countries. And so if they get those surrounding countries and they occupy them, right, and they become part of this, you know, empire, this new Israeli empire, which would have to be, like, if they're saying this is their promised land, that's what they have to do. And so going back to that, you know, that Libya's already compromised, and they could be putting pressure on all these in Egypt, right? And they, you know, they failed because they're the neocons and it doesn't work. But you can see what, like, if you look at this as a risk board, they're getting this area here, and this is, you know, this is the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea, and these are important areas. All these ports around here, a flow of oil. They would control the world's oil supply, like a good portion of it, and then all the other things that go with it, right? And all these countries would be, you know, Israel would be like the America in this area, and that's what the neocons' vision always was. And you know, I'll come back to this later on today or tomorrow when Israel responds, and I'll put that at the end of the video. So this is a, you know, developing story as I make these videos. But you can see, you know, this is what their goal is. And every time the neocons try something, they failed. The Iraq War was a disaster, right? They failed in Iraq. They failed in Afghanistan. Libya's a frickin' mess, right, where they destroyed Libya. The Russians blocked them in Syria. And then there was other little things. They did some stuff in Egypt, and they had some other things that they tried, you know, post 9/11. And everything they tried failed. And so much so that they were persona non grata. And George the Jeb Bush was going to be the front runner to be president, and you know, they were already, like, they had soured on the neocons who destroyed George W. Bush's presidency. You know, they used him as a complete tool that he was, right? And so the neocons were dead and gone. But Biden and the Democrats so desperately wanted to get rid of Trump, and the neocons still had a lot of shadow power in the Republican Party, that they made a deal with them, and they handed over their foreign policy to them. And this was a disastrous result, was the war with the Ukraine and Russia, which is already a disaster for the world, and it's a failure. They just always fail. And they, you know, they never take responsibility for their failures. And they're, you know, they pressured the CIA. I mean, they were too radical for even the CIA and these other intelligence agencies. Like, they're just batshit crazy. And now the Cheneys are backing Kamala Harris, right? Because the neocons are running this show now, and this is what they're pushing. And the neocons, everything surrounds the relationship they have with Israel. And they're going to get all this stuff. They're going to turn Palestine into Israel. Again, there's no Palestine on the map here, right? And so this is all, it's now just looks, even on the map, this is Google Maps, they're already calling what used to be Palestine, which is the Gaza Strip here. They used to call that, you know, Palestine, but now that's just a part of the greater Israel, right? So we'll come back to that. Okay, so today's Friday, October 4th. I already finished this video and uploaded it, but this is, you know, part of it. So I'm just going to put this where it's appropriate in the middle of the video where I cover this stuff with Israel. Live updates. Israel targets presumed new Hezbollah leader in massive Beirut strikes. Iran's leader issues warning in rare speech. Israeli strikes also cut off a key crossing used by tens of thousands of people fleeing in neighboring Syria, Lebanon's transport minister said. And so, again, whatever they have there in terms of Hezbollah and, you know, these Iran-backed groups is what they're calling it. Israel basically bombed its neighbor Lebanon, and with like bunker-busting bombs, which killed God knows how many kids and innocent people, right? Because Israel sucks. The Iran supreme leader vowed his country and its allies would not back down after its brilliant operation against Israel, as he delivered a rare sermon with a rifle by his side and led prayers commemorating Hezbollah's powerful leader Hassan Nasrallah. So I want to talk about this time and place of our choosing, which is what Israel said they would respond, which is what always is said. George W. Bush said it after 9/11. We'll respond in a time or place of our choosing. Like, we're in control, we're the dominant one, we can slap these flies, whatever. That's the rhetoric there. A time or place of our choosing. we're not gonna do it on their schedule. But the bottom line is they're killing innocent people. You know, both sides are, but Israel started this thing. Like they say, oh, the thing on October 7th. But in reality, we know what's going on here because Israel's the one that wants more land. And the, greater Israel, Lebanon's part of that. And so you have these people, the Lebanese people on that side. And, I know there's a person that does meditation. He grew up in America, a Lebanese person that I know. And he definitely does not like Israel, right? The people that live there from years ago. Like I haven't talked to that guy like 20 years. But, when I knew nothing about this area. But the neighboring, places there, I mean, they know Israel wants to expand their land. And that's what this is about, ultimately. Everything's a land grab with them. Because greater Israel, the promised land, Lebanon's a part of that, right? And so, these people are fleeing into Syria, of all places. I mean, remember when America, all that, stuff that happened with when Russia war blocked America and Syria. And so Israel and Iran are at war right now. And that's going to continue, this is going to escalate. Like, this is not stopping because the picture there is what Israel wants to have happen, right? The greater Israel, the promised land. And so this is never going to stop. We'll cover this more in my next video, probably.
Tax for the seniors. Do we have any seniors here? I hate to admit it. I'm a senior. They'll say he's...
Yeah, you really are a senior. You're 80, yeah.
Got a conflict of interest. He's giving this to himself. Watch. I'll end up in front of a grand jury tomorrow. Donald Trump has suggested no tax on Social Security benefits, and he's got a conflict of interest. We're putting him before...
Wait a minute. They tax Social Security benefits? This is money you've paid into the government, money that was taxed, and then when you get it back, so they tax you on it? Fuck. I had no idea, right?
Grand jury, because I've seen more grand juries than Alphonse Capone. And he averaged about killing one person a week. Alphonse, the meanest of them all.
Alphonse.
I know more about grand juries than Alphonse ever even thought about. My father's looking down on my mother. They're great people. They say, can you believe my son did this? Can you believe that my son would run for politics and be treated?
Wait. You just, like he just admitted.
They're great people. They say, can you believe my son did this? Can you...
He just talks too much, right?
You believe that my son would run for politics and be treated this way?
Run for politics? There's nothing worse than running for politics.
But you know what? And we're doing great. We won the big case in Florida. We're winning them all. I'll tell you what. Did you see? We won the big case. That was the big one. They're going to get him in Florida. They're going to get him in Florida. It was always... That seemed to be the documents case. I had every right to have him, called the Presidential Records Act. That's what they passed it for. But he didn't have that act because he wasn't president. And he got out. You know how he got out? And I don't want to talk about him too much because she's running. Maybe he'll go.
Okay, so he's definitely lost. He's losing us more and more of a step. Like his age is showing. Like his age is showing. It'll be a disaster if he wins. I mean, I can't imagine a Kamala Harris presidency either, but Jesus Christ, this is, it's going to be way worse than his first term. And of course, he'll give Israel everything they want, which is, so will Kamala. It's just, it's already done. Okay, so let's get this thing going here.
Welcome back to All the Smoke. We got a very special guest today. Very excited to sit down and talk to
our biggest guest.
Yeah. I wouldn't lie about that.
Yeah, you sold the show. I do it over.
No, you did it. So we didn't do nothing of it. Excuse me. Our biggest guest. I've been corrected, Miss Madam Vice.
Okay, so this is here.
President.
Thank
Kamala.
you. It is so good to
Thank
be
you for
with
sitting
you
down with
guys.
us. Thank you for having us in your home.
So this is Matt Barnes, and this is Steven Jackson, and this is the All the Smoke podcast. Now, there's a lot of sports podcasts that have come after this one. This was kind of the original one. And these guys are giving Kamala Harris street cred, right? And so let me switch over to a voiceover here. Okay, so the term "all this smoke," you don't want this smoke, right? So it's got a double entendre. It's a double meaning. And so when somebody says, "Oh, you didn't want this smoke," or it's like it's almost like a threat. It's like talking shit, where smoke could be some form of an ass whooping, either in sports or in an argument. Like Kamala Harris could say to Donald Trump doesn't want all this smoke, and that's why he's not going to go into a second debate, something like that, right? It also could imply violence or physical violence in one way or another. So for that part of the meaning, these guys are thugs in various ways. Steven Jackson, there's an epic fight, the Malice in the Palace, the fight in Detroit when the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons were hating on each other, and Meta World Peace, the artist formerly known as Ron Artest, went in and started slapping fans around. And the other guy that went in was Steven Jackson. And Steven Jackson was like, there's lots of basketball players, NBA players, that posture and act like tough guys, but it's just, hold me back, right? Kind of shit. They don't really want to fight. And most athletes in general, they might be, able to beat up weaker people, civilians, but these are big strong guys against big strong guys, and they're not trained to fight. But there are some who like to fight. There's some NBA players who like to fight, and Steven Jackson is one of them, and so is Matt Barnes. Matt Barnes' big claim to fame is one of his former teammates, Derek Fisher, who was a point guard, smaller guy, started to date his ex-wife, and he was disciplining Derek Fisher's kids, and his kids called up to complain. There's a party going on. I think his ex-wife was a part of those basketball wives. I'm not sure. But he beat the shit out of Derek Fisher in like the middle of a party. And the cops came. And, he had numerous like fights and things, scuffles in the NBA. So both of these guys like to fight. So that's the, you don't want this smoke part of their name. But they also are avid pot smokers. And they would smoke pot on air. It was part of their whole thing here. So, and they actually talk about pot coming up, right? So what these guys are sort of thuggish, street cred guys, right? They used to say Kobe Bryant had no street cred because his dad was an NBA player, and he grew up in Europe, and he spoke multiple languages, including Italian. He could rap in Italian, right? He was, an educated and, somebody grew up with wealth and some privilege. His dad was a former NBA player who also played in Europe. And so Kobe Bryant wasn't considered like a thuggish, someone who grew up in the streets. And in the beginning, they used to say he doesn't have any street cred, right? And so Kamala Harris doesn't have any street cred. We'll get to that when she talks about, they get into her ethnicities. And this is part of what this is about here. Also, both these guys played for the Golden State Warriors at different times, maybe together at some period of time. And she has a connection to that area, the Warriors. Kamala Harris has a connection to the San Francisco Bay Area because she, if you think about her career, she got her law, she passed the bar, I think, after multiple tries. And then she got a job as a prosecutor. And then from there, she, banged this old guy that was twice her age. She was 29, he was 31. And he was a kingmaker, eventually became governor. And he got her the job of district attorney, which she had, and then she ran for attorney general of all of California. And so most of her work came in the San Francisco area, and that's where when my family and I went to, me and my two kids went to 2017, we went to celebrate one of the spiritual gatherings, and there's an ashram there, Fremont, California. And it was, the third Master's Charges, it was in July. And my kids and I, a bunch of the people went to a local park that was right near the ashram. And Fremont is connected to all these areas that Kamala lived in, right? And what I didn't realize is we were right by Silicon Valley. So when we were leaving, we went up to the Redwoods. So this is, a few years back, 5 years ago. And when we went to this park, we walked for a bit, and I had no idea we were by the ocean, you know, the bay. And we came around, and there was the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and I was like, holy fuck, right? And so a lot of these richer practitioners of the Sajmark system worked in Silicon Valley. And a lot of Indians came over from India who, you know, did well academically, and they got these good jobs, tech jobs, and they had enough money to buy what used to be a bowling alley and turned into a meditation center. And, you know, I kind of got a sense of, I mean, it's a beautiful place, right? Like that whole area, you know, there's parts of California, LA is a pit, and there's other places I didn't like driving across there. But as my kids and I drove across the state, we were like, oh, this is a beautiful state. You know, not just the redwoods, but the farming areas and things like this. And so we went to the sequoias where that's like, they're at an altitude of like 7,000 feet, well out in the, I mean, just, you know, one of the really great gems, jewels of America. Of course, California's politically is a disaster. And Kamala Harris, you know, San Francisco, that's where she worked, and then she became, you know, she went from, you know, prosecutor to district attorney to senator, boom, 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 and then to vice president. Like, you know, she spent like not that many years at each of those jobs, right? Like, I don't know how long she was an attorney, maybe, you know, up until the point she was, you know, 29 when she got, you know, she was fast-tracked after banging that guy. So from the time that she was 30, she did limited time at all those jobs and then moved quickly all the way to where she's being considered president, right? But if you look at San Francisco, it's an absolute pit. They destroyed one of the great cities of our country. I mean, beautiful city with all this culture, and it's been utterly destroyed by the Democratic policies, and Kamala Harris is that, you know, is that guy. She's a San Francisco guy. So there's two things I want to focus on here. I don't want to cover all this, but her talking about her ethnicity, and then also her talking about Dougie Fresh.
What do you think when you hear people kind of questioning just the fabric of who you are?
Well, one, I don't listen to it.
Okay.
Yeah, you do. We know you do.
I'm really clear about who I am, and if
this is why you're here. She wants street cred. So there's no doubt that she has some African descent, right? She is at least half Indian, Tamil Indian. Her mom's like full-blooded Indian from India. And then she has a Jamaican father who is light-skinned. She has Irish, you know, some guy who was an Irish slave owner who lived in Ireland, you know, Britain, a rich man. And there's other ancestry. I wonder what her 23andMe would say. But she has a lot of things going on, right, ethnically. The issue here is being from island people, Jamaican people. You know, I lived in the Virgin Islands, and island people are different. They have a different accent. They have a different culture, right? They're not African American. They also come from, you know, they're brought there as slaves, you know, these things, slave transport. So there's some of that stuff. I mean, they have various languages they speak. Some of them speak French, like the Haitians. Some of them speak, you know, some version of French. Some of them speak Spanish. You know, there's these various dialects. So they all have different cultures. They're different people. And, you know, in terms of street cred and getting accepted into a group of people, like the African American people in America have an opinion of Kamala Harris. And many of them don't feel like she is, you know, the same way with Kobe Bryant has street cred, because not only is she a mix of various races, but she grew up in academia, and they really want to sell that she grew up in Oakland, because Oakland's a tough place. But she has nothing to do with Oakland, really. Like, she worked in San Francisco, and she grew up in college towns, which I talk about, you know, all the time, with two parents who were highly educated. And so, you know, her experience isn't the kind of experience that they're selling to you in terms of the way that she wants to sell herself to people of color and to liberal people who would appreciate a rags to riches story. You know, they want to talk about how Donald Trump comes from money and is elitist, but Donald Trump's dad was a builder, and he dealt with everyday people, whereas her family came from academia, which is like a whole level of another intellectual elitism. Like, there's, you know, and I like college towns, but you know, there's these intellectuals that live there, and they're, you know, they're often pompous and arrogant and disconnected from the average person.
Anybody else is not. They need to go through their own level of therapy. That's not my issue.
I also want to point out his Freemasonic checkerboard. I got a thing to do about Freemasons with a movie I was watching, which is going to tie into this, at least his suit.
Right.
No, I'm going to do that probably in maybe my next video.
Mother was very clear. She was raising 2 black girls to be 2 proud black women.
Okay, so that's not accurate. She was Indian. You know, Kamala Harris talks about the food that she would make. Her mom would make Indian food, right? You know, I don't know many Indians that they come over first generation and they adapt to American cooking. You know, they might go to some American restaurants and things like this, but they mostly cook Indian food. I mean, all the Indians I know, and I know quite a few of them because of doing the meditation that I do, and I went and, you know, I've been at a lot of different Indian people's houses in America. And their kids are American, and they cook American foods. But even Mindy Keeling, who is also from Chennai, you know, when Kamala went over to her house, she was cooking Indian food. And Kamala Harris said she grew up. Well, let's just show you that right here.
Stop. This is so funny. I told my dad I was like bringing over the stuff from the store. He's like, obviously I put them in Taster's Choice.
But this literally was how my mother kept all of this stuff.
That's so funny.
What is that?
So her mother had all this stuff, right? All these ingredients. And this is, you know, and I could see this, they would save these jars. You know, they're very frugal people. You know, they live with a level of scarcity there and, you know, level of poverty consciousness. Even the people with wealth are, you know, kind of freaked out about money.
Do they tell each other?
Taster's Choice.
Hi guys, it's Mindy. I'm here in my kitchen, and today we are cooking, but we have a very special guest. Very special. Senator Kamala Harris.
Hi guys.
Wait, so here's what
Okay, so it's just classic Kamala.
I want to know.
Okay.
Is it respectful to call, like, I should be calling you Senator Harris, right?
No, you should not. That's not on my birth certificate.
Okay.
Call
Kamala?
Yes, please.
Okay, because the Indian in me, I feel like my parents,
Just
my
don't
dad
call
will
me-
watch this.
Just don't call me auntie.
Okay, okay. I won't call you auntie. They'll be like, how could you call her by her
So, like, she grew up with this, right? Like, this is her culture. Because her mom was her biggest influence.
first name? She's worked so hard. Okay, so what we're going to cook today is an Indian recipe.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you are Indian.
Yes, yes.
Okay, and I don't know that everybody knows that, but I find that wherever I go and I see Indian people at the supermarket, on the street, everyone's like, you know Kamala Harris is Indian, right? It's like the thing we're so excited about to have you running for president.
Yeah.
So we're both Indian,
Yes.
but actually we're both South Indian.
Yes. You look like the entire one half of my family.
Okay, thank you.
You do.
I've been telling people
You
we're
do.
related already,
Yeah.
so this is perfect. It's basically
So, you know, there's that, right?
true. And so, do you raised eating South Indian food?
South Indian food. Lots of rice and yogurt, potato curry, dal, lots of dal, idli.
Yes, Italy. That's a deep cut. Okay, so what we're cooking today.
So when you make these things, you know, we got used to eating that. I was a vegetarian for a while, and, you know, when I was really, you know, a part of the organization. Of course, when I go to India, they have free food at the ashram, and then you can buy food. And, you know, most of it's this kind of food, right? And, you know, vegetarian in South India. So she would have been a vegetarian. Her mom would have been, at least in the beginning. So Kamala Harris talks about, you know, in later on, which I showed you part of this All This Smoke podcast thing, interview. She talked about, like, you know, roasting some kind of, I don't know, was it ham? I don't know. It was something. She was talking about that, right? Like when she got upset about, you know, she did all this cooking or whatever. You know, that's what she was her go-to thing. But she didn't grow up with that, right? Like, she makes it sound like it's sentimental. But, you know, she was babysitted and she went to a daycare. But that's not a family. And so, for the most part, this is what she would have been her comfort food, right? And she's saying that. This is what she grew up with. Her mom cooked this food.
Today is two things. One of the South Indian staples is dosa, which is kind of like a sourdough crepe. And then we're going to make a potato curry, which is the traditional accompaniment. So I printed out. So
Where did you get that?
Okay, so let's go further here.
My grandfather was very progressive, and she wanted to study science.
My mother's.
Okay, let's go back a little bit more here.
That's when they came over.
My parents were, I think, almost maybe late 20s, like 28, 29, 30.
Yeah. See, my mother came when she was 19.
Wow.
by herself.
No way. Wow.
My grandfather was very progressive, and she wanted to study science.
My mother's father.
Okay, so in terms of progressive in India, it's not progressive in America. Like, the cultures are so different. But it's not progressive in America. Maybe he was open-minded to a few things, you know, Western things, right? But you would have to live in a Western place. And even then, you know, it's a very, I don't want to say dense, but, you know, it's I mean, the enmeshment in the culture and the, you know, losing face is a big thing, right? So
was the same way.
And you know, this is the thing that's really interesting, because people have these stereotypes and actually misconceptions about who Indians are. I mean, at least I can speak about my own experience, and you have a similar experience, sounds like, where, you know, my grandfather was very progressive. Like, his daughter wanted to go and do that, and he was like, go ahead.
I think this is done.
I think so too.
And I think that we can move on to dosa.
Okay.
So that's her, in reference to her saying here that they're raising, this is her mom and this is her grandparents. You know, apparently she lied. Somebody sent me this thing from the black woman who's really conservative, whatever her name is. Can't think of it right now. But she was talking about how she talked about how her dad was, or maybe her grandmother or somebody, and that person died before Kamala. It was like some kind of, she got their dates wrong. She made up a story, another one of these bogus stories. But again, you know, these are 3 Indian people with, you know, 2 biracial kids here. Not raising just black kids, right? I mean, the way that Kamala Harris phrases it is not accurate, because she's trying to get street cred, right? Like, she's one way with Mindy Keeling, and she's another way with these guys of the, you know, all the smoke.
And he was like, go ahead.
I think this is done.
I think so too.
And I think that we can move on to dosa.
Okay.
Here's my pre-made dosa
So
mix.
let's go to the end here.
It's going to be pretty good. There we go.
Wow, I am really impressed.
Okay, so now the components are all ready. And we're just going to take...
Mix it together
I'm
here.
going to do the same thing on mine. So, masala dosa. Thank you for eating this. I would give this a hard B-. The dosas weren't... I didn't think there were...
But the flavor is very nice.
Thank you. I was nervous cooking in front of you.
But you shouldn't be. You're such a good cook.
Okay.
Okay, so she's so compassionate. So that's, you know, Kamala being an Indian, right? And so really what she is a complex mix of people, which would be interesting if she embraced it. Instead of, you know, trying to, you know, politicize her story and make it like, oh, I grew up like a hardworking people in a middle class, you know, environment, right? You know, all the things that, you know, I'm just an average Joe like all you guys. It's not, you know, it's not who she is, right? It's more complex than that. It's much more nuanced. And if she was a person that had developed some sort of internal world and embraced some of these things, and she could talk about these cultural things and be interesting about it, right? Like RFK Jr. was able to talk about his family in a real way, right? You can still be selling yourself, but you're selling the real version of yourself, or even, you know, a whitewashed version of yourself, right? A politicized version of yourself, without having to just, you know, fit into all these bogus stereotypes that you don't fit into.
And it was never a question.
You know, it's funny because over the years, journalists, some, not most, will want to talk about it. And I say, okay, if you want to have this conversation, I'm prepared to have it, but sit down and get comfortable for a few hours. If you want to start talking about race in America, you want to talk about the 1/8 rule?
A drop.
Right. You want to talk about?
How a black woman or a woman of color is 5 times more likely to get an abortion. You want to talk about that one?
What it means in terms of who you are perceived to be and the impact that can have on the rest of your life, regardless of who you actually are in terms of your God-given capacity and the rights that you have and should have. So, you know, I don't mess with that. I think that's other people trying to figure some stuff out that and they need.
You know, the big thing that she is a person of privilege. She grew up in, you know, a fairly, you know, wealthy area in Berkeley. She went to these good schools, went to Canada, these other places. Her parents were, you know, wealthy doctorate level people, and also the intellectual aspect of it. And she was able to, you know, get into college and go through these various other academic institutions, and then get a law degree and become a lawyer, and then get hired as a prosecutor and making, above average, a higher level income. And then she was, banged this guy and started making really good money, right? She made like $400,000 in 3 or 4 years, making over $100,000 a year, back years ago when that was, that would be like 400, that would be, they say millions of dollars now would be the equivalent to. She was given a Mercedes-Benz by this guy, and she was fast-tracked, where she was on, being interviewed by Matt Lauer, and, she'd written a book, and then she was a senator. They just gave her a senatorial position, and then after doing that, she ran for president. She wasn't even done with her first term as senator. She was running for president, and she gets picked as vice president, and they're already talking about her again. This Chris Matthews, early in the presidential campaign, he said what a dream ticket it would be if it was Biden and Harris. And they hadn't even had their first debate yet. He was already talking about her, and there was 20 other candidates there, and they were already, grooming her. She was already a selected person, and so she was part of a club. And so her talking about, the racism and things and prejudice, she clearly never experienced that, right? Not in any real way. Maybe as a kid, a little bit here or there, but like she doesn't really even have any stories about that. And so she talks about that like maybe other people's stories, and she's not good at even that element of it.
They got some issues.
They got to deal with it themselves.
You've also been attacked for not having biological children, but you are a stepmom, and I'm a stepfather. I just had my 7th. I had a little boy 2 weeks ago, but I have 3 stepchildren that are mine. And being a dad was natural. Being a dad to my 4 sons was natural, but learning to navigate not wanting to step on toes, how do you earn the love and the trust? How did you earn Ella and Cole's love and trust, and how did you get the name Mamala?
I'll start with this. I am a daughter of divorced parents. My parents were divorced when I was 5. And just being very frank and candid with you, when Doug and I started dating, his parents have been married over 60 years. I had to explain to him what it is like to be a child of divorced parents. And
you were educating him back then. You're dropping wisdom,
including that it was really important to me that I knew what he and my relationship would be before I formed a relationship with the kids, because that's just from my perspective and experience.
Because my mom, she was just like pouring it out there. Like there's all these guys I was calling dad for like 2 weeks.
Scared of the children, because children form attachments. So I was very intentional about waiting.
They were 15 and they were like 15 and 17 years old, right? Like they weren't kids.
Till I knew that this is a real relationship. Before I got to know the kids, and then we became, thick as thieves.
Thick as thieves. The optional word is thieves. So let's go to the Dougie Fresh piece here. Okay, so the first question was about meeting her husband, Doug. And the reason I covered it second here is because Doug is a Hollywood lawyer. He represents celebrities. And he is Jewish, and he's a practicing Jewish guy. And so, like, her marrying him is not anything to do with any of her upbringing and her, her wanting to be black or her Indian culture or any of these things, right? And so it's a person who really doesn't identify with their culture. Like, there are people who want to marry somebody that has a similar ethnic upbringing than they do, right? And by marrying a Jewish guy and a guy who's, white Jewish guy, it has nothing to do with, it's not like he's a white Irish guy, like she has Irish blood. Like, unless she has some, I don't know if there's what her other, 23andMe stuff would be. But she's not connected to this guy in a genetic way. But also, he grew up in New Jersey. So, like, East Coast guy who's now living in California, and Kamala Harris, whatever their connection is. I don't care about these things. But I'm just saying the way that she's trying to sell herself and marrying him is a big deal here.
to that date, and now we're here. Did you ever imagine this was going to be the journey?
No, I just have a really bossy best friend.
It was a blind date, right?
It was a blind date. And she called me up because she and her husband met him and got to know him, and then she just decided that this could work. And said to me, just go out with him once. Don't Google him, just go out with him.
Don't Google him.
Don't Google him, because if you Google this motherfucker, you won't want anything part of it.
Yeah, right?
And it turned out she was right.
It was a good choice.
I'm in a very happy marriage. I'm very thankful
So
to say.
where'd you guys go? Did you really eat, or did you just do a salad? Like, did you really let your hair down and have fun?
So he came to pick me up.
Okay. What kind of car?
A BMW.
Uh-oh, okay.
Kaboom. Because they're privileged, right? He's a rich Hollywood lawyer. She's a rich, whatever she was, district attorney. She's somewhat famous, right? They're both lawyers. I mean, you know, when people think of, oh, who do we identify with? It's almost never lawyers, right? Like, lawyers have their own special breed of, you know, dislike. Because how many lawyer jokes are there?
Moving in style.
Well, okay, but here's the thing that was actually really funny in retrospect. I get in the car and he says, I just need to tell you something. And I'm like, okay, what's this going to be? And he said, I'm a really bad driver.
Give you the heads up, huh?
So that's how it started.
Okay.
That's
just great. We might die tonight, but at least we'll have this wonderful blind date.
I guess he was just trying to create little expectations. Right. And we went to what turned out to be his one favorite restaurant where everybody knows who he is, which is
so
obviously very smart. Oh yeah, so he could walk in and they were like, "Hey, Doug."
Yeah. I see you, Doug.
Dougie Fresh, Dougie.
Right, exactly.
Bay Area girl.
Yeah.
Born in Oakland. You grew up around the TMC times. Golden State.
That's the Golden State Warriors, but she wasn't born in Oakland. There was an Oakland hospital. But she was, you know, she grew up in whatever that town, Berkeley, whatever it is. So she grew up in a, you know, college town. So let's go to Dougie Fresh here. Doug Emhoff accused of forcefully slapping New York City girlfriend for flirting with another man at a glitzy gala in 2012 report. Vice President Kamala Harris' husband is being accused of slapping his ex-girlfriend for flirting with another man. Second gentleman Doug Emhoff, 59, supposedly struck his then-girlfriend, a successful New York attorney, in the face so hard that she spun around while in a valet line after an event at the Cannes Film Festival in May of 2012. Three unnamed friends of the woman reportedly told the Daily Mail, you can go look at that one as well, the woman, who's identified only as Jane, allegedly called one of her friends sobbing in the cab immediately after the incident. A second friend claimed that Jane, who had been dating Emhoff for 3 months at the time, also told her about the incident, the Daily Mail claimed. Here is the Daily Mail version of this. There they are pictured together. And so, you know, he looks a little bit, you know, he looks like, I told you, is that Anthony Weiner. But, you know, this is, we already know one story where he banged the nanny and impregnated her. And that's why he got divorced from his first wife. So Dougie Fresh is a real player. Dougie. But also, Doug Emhoff went from being Hollywood's go-to lawyer to America's second gentleman. For years, Emhoff litigated high-profile Hollywood cases ranging from copyright disputes to antitrust issues. He successfully prevented an upstart wine company from infringing on the trademark of The Godfather, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. He defended the husband of Real Housewives of the Beverly Hills star when he was caught up in a real estate quarrel with the vice president of Equatorial Guinea, and he represented the production company Legendary Pictures in a long legal battle with a group of writers it hired to develop the 2014 Godzilla reboot. So he seems to always be on the side of the power and the money in these cases, right? Another article here from Vanity Fair, how Hollywood shaped Kamala Harris and Doug Emhoff's marriage. And so there's a Hollywood connection. Like, she is a privileged person, and she is hobnobbed with these celebrities. She gets all these celebrities' endorsements. And she's from this area, and, you know, all of these things, right? And so, you know, Dougie Fresh. So here's Biden.
The answer is no. I think there's things we'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, that they should respond and enforce it. Sir, could I ask you?
Okay, so he says he won't support Israel bombing Iran's nuclear facilities, which apparently will trigger a whole bunch of other things, and Iran would move forward with weaponizing. Iran is holding off on becoming a nuclear power. They're like 2 weeks away, and anytime they want, they can finish up what they got to do to have the ability to launch nuclear weapons. Okay, so I just gave a long voiceover about hatred and, you know, just the inner condition and how we're calling to ourselves self-destruction, which I think is kind of epic. It's going to be the voiceover to my next video, the introduction. But this happened, and this is, you know, a part of it. I get into Trump and, you know, how Trump is a hate creator, right, on both sides. But he said this horrific thing.
You met with President Zelensky last week. Should President Zelensky be prepared to give up some of Ukraine territory in order to end the war? And the second part here is, if you were president right now, after Iran launched more than 200 missiles towards Israel, last week you had suggested that if Iran tried to attack you, that you would blow the country to smithereens. How would you handle Iran right now?
Well,
would you use U.S. force? Would you use U.S. force?
Iran wouldn't be around that.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be around if they did that, but let's assume I'm not around. The President of the United States should blow that country to smithereens, because you can't do that. And
you know what a piece of fucking shit he is. You know, horrible person. Like, Iran has legitimate claims against America. Like, they have a spiritual claim against America. America has wronged them when the CIA took down Mossadegh and they installed a puppet leader and they exploited Iranian oil. America and Great Britain and the Western countries fucked Iran over in ways, you know, and you just can't be a piece of shit, right? And not acknowledge that Iran has a point of view and a side to their, you know. And I want to talk about my experience with Iranian people, just some of the people I like the best. You know, when I was at the ashram in Chennai, you know, we were there for 3 years, and there were a lot of people who lived in that area who sent their kids to there was a school there, and I met people from all around the world, and these were the cream of the crop. These are spiritual people. Some of them are, you know, a-holes, but most of them, you know, are just like nice spiritual people. And I really like the Iranians. There's a number of them that were there. And, you know, part of me doesn't even want to talk about it because their country's so oppressive that they can't even, they're not even supposed to be meditating, right? And so, like, if they, you know, the government found out that they were doing the meditation, they would be, you know, persecuted in some way. And that's because of America. And I know what we did to them. And they certainly know what America did to them. And they didn't hold any prejudice against Americans, all the people that I met. And, you know, Americans are kind of assholes, like, you know, compared to other people. Like, we're just arrogant. And, you know, I remember how I used to rub people the wrong way because of the way I am, right? And I was worse then, too. But, you know, it's just they didn't hold it. You know, like, if somebody had done that to our country, we would be like, we'd hate them forever. If we got Iran, if America had somebody come in and take down a good president and then install a puppet leader who was so brutal, the Shah of Iran was so brutal, that we would hate them. I mean, this level of, like, animosity would be there. And, you know, America has completely screwed them over. And then backing Israel, which is, you know, we've allowed Israel to bully these other countries there. And Iran and the Palestinians have, you know, I mean, they're doing a genocide there. And what about Israel being blown? You know, like, so blown. You just don't blow other countries to smithereens, right? You don't talk like that. Like, he's a pussy, right? Like, he's not a tough guy. Like, you know, he's not a physical person. Like, he's not, you know, he wouldn't go to war himself. His kids wouldn't go to war, right? they're elitists, and he's a pussy, right? He's not a tough guy. Like, American soldiers will have to like answer for that, right? Or American people would, and the whole thing. And Russia would, like, Russia's got a treaty with Iran, and they got nuclear weapons, right? And they would like, he'd be like, why are they bombing me? Like this attitude. And I talk about it in my voiceover for my next video. Where you can't understand, like, Trump doesn't allow people to have their reaction to him. He says horrible things, and then people get pissed at him, and he's like, "Why do you hate me? I'm just trying to save America." When you're a lying piece of shit, you're just exacerbating everything, and you make things up about people. But when they do that about him, like the stuff that he whines about constantly, like this piece of shit whines about how he's being persecuted through the courts and through, people slandering him. And yet he said those horrible things about Haitians, which turned out not to be true with no real evidence. But he gets to do that. Like, when you justify your behaviors, that you get to do them because you're a victim or you're you. But when somebody else does the same thing to you, you whine like a little bitch, right? And that's Trump.
The president should make a statement to that effect. But as you know, I mean, you're in danger right now. You are in danger now because of them and their challenge to me. And the reason they did that is because I had them in a position where they would have made a deal. They had no money. There was no terrorism. There was no money for Hamas.
There's the Iranian government, which sucks, but there's people there. There's good people there. And that country, like I said, I know people there. I know good people, the nice, sweet people that live there. They're an ancient culture, the Persians. And so ancient artifacts and things, I mean, let's just blow it to smithereens. Oh, blow it to smithereens. And, I mean, he's a pussy, right? Like, he's not, it's just tough talk from a guy who's not willing to put himself or his family or anybody else that he loves or connected to him at risk like that, right? He's playing with other people's lives and all the kids that are there, all the people. Oh, we should just, bomb what, And this idea of bombing the refineries that came up from Lindsey Graham. You know how many kids in Iran would starve because of that? And other people around the world wouldn't have, the fuel prices that go up? Well, I don't care. Like these wealthy men, right? These horrible people.
There's no money for Hezbollah, you know that. I mean, that was reported when I was leaving. They said there was absolutely no terrorism. In 4 years, we had no terrorism. And a large part of that was Iran had no money. And I wasn't looking to hurt them. I was looking to, I want them to be wonderful and great and happy. But we didn't want them to have a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear weapon.
Why not? Why not them? Why Israel's responsible? America's responsible? Like the American leadership, you talk about what horrible people Joe Biden is and incompetent they are. They have control over nuclear weapons right now. I mean, it's all of it. Like, what country should have a nuclear weapon, right? What country is stable and not corrupt?
Well, I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to give up negotiating abilities so I don't want to say exactly, but they understand where I stand. And we have to get back to being at least a partially civilized world. What's going on today? They sent 200 missiles over to Israel. And now people would say, well, now it's Israel's turn, right? That's what happens. It goes back and forth. It could happen for a long time. Should have never happened. It would never have happened. And again, Iran was not in a position to sponsor terror because they didn't have any money. I mean, now they have $300 billion.
Yeah, but the money that they gave them, and again, Israel was against this deal, was so that they would suspend their nuclear program. So America and this deal that was made with Iran, with these other countries, was so that Iran would stop trying to make a nuclear weapon. And so, whether you think that was a good deal or not, Iran almost has a nuclear weapon now. And so, if Israel and Iran exchange nuclear weapons, like nuclear bombs or whatever, if they drop bombs on each other, and whatever that does to Russia and America and all the rest of the whole region, I mean, the nuclear fallout contaminates countries around there and all the rest of it. And so, again, I mean, it's like he just sucks. Like he's an immature little piece of shit.
Biden took off all the sanctions. I had sanctions. I told China, if you buy oil from Iran, that was their biggest customer, you're not going to do any business in the United States, and we're going to put tariffs all over you.
Okay, so that's an empty threat, because think about all the things that come from China, cheap goods that come from China, and all the retail people that would go out of business. Like, you can't say, like, China can't, you know, they could dump American dollars and destroy the American economy. They have all these dollars. They could, you know, just get rid of their American. They're holding dollars as a, you know, one of their assets. And then anytime they could screw America over and dump the dollar and devalue it, right? And also, you know, raise their prices and things. But American retail, and, you know, we're you know, they can't do that with America because America's their customer, right? America uses their goods, and they like to manufacture. And so that's why, you know, war between China and Iran, China and America, is, you know, detrimental to both countries, because we have a symbiotic relationship, even though it's a hostile one. And so the whole thing is just silly. He's a silly little orange fish boy. So then there was this.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris made Iran rich in a very short period of 3.5 years. They have $300 billion now. They're rich. I mean, they pay $6 billion every time they have if they have somebody that was kidnapped. It's always $6 billion. Who ever heard of that? Somebody else gets like $4,000. How much you want? Give me $2,000. You have anything?
You know, he's saying they were made rich because they were allowed to sell their oil, and they didn't put economic sanctions on them, right? Whatever financial, you know, money they gave them, that was one thing. To not, you know, create a nuclear weapon, that was, you know, that was some kind of financial deal that was made. But really what he's talking about is allowing Iran to trade globally. And, you know, all these countries, like, it's, you know, think about these countries like they're the truthers. Not that they are, but Russia and Iran, you know, they're being treated the way we are treated in the truth community, where they just say, oh, you're a terrorist, you're a truther, you know, you're a conspiracy theorist. You know, they just make up words about you because you have questions about an establishment and a culture and a system that is clearly not positive. It's not godly, it's not divine, it's not natural. And when you question the system, or people who are, you know, remember what happened to Gaddafi. Gaddafi went to the UN and said there were 65 wars that happened, and the UN didn't stop any of those wars. And he got into all this stuff, like he just told the truth. And then they took him out, like, you know, a couple months later. And so, you know, it's, I mean, Gaddafi was a good leader. He had 70% approval. He was giving the money back to the people. He was actually one of the better leaders. You know, he seemed eccentric, and he dressed weird. But they took him out for, you know, wanting to do what's best for his people. He wanted to sell oil in a gold dinar, oil for gold, and he was creating a dinar, like an Arab currency, and that would have destroyed the petrodollars, so they got rid of him. And so, you know, anybody who threatens the evil establishment, they demonize the people. And not that they're good. I wouldn't say that any of these guys are good guys or good leaders, but they question, and, you know, oftentimes they tell the truth about, you know, America. There was this wonderful truther video made by North Korea. Like, it was, they nailed America. Like, you know, I mean, in a sophisticated way. It was like an excellent truther video that used to be up on YouTube. And I'm like, you know, Jesus Christ, North Korea is able to destroy American, you know, I mean, it was like it just had truthful stuff in it, right? Like, North Korea, which is one of the worst oppressive, I mean, it's a bad dictatorship. People are starving there. And they can take down America's, you know, culture and, you know, establishment with a video. Like, they just got it, right?
6 billion. It's always 6 billion. With Russia, it was 6 billion. And they also got back their spy, the greatest spy, they say perhaps. He was a spy, but he was really more of an arms merchant. And the greatest arms merchant, the greatest buyer of military equipment, they say, anywhere at any time.
He was the best. He was the greatest. Trump talks always in greatest terms of best and greatest.
Got him back, but we got our basketball player back. That was the trend.
Boo. Boo. Well, Brittany Griner should still be in prison. Send Brittany Griner back to Russia.
But it's true. She used to tie her.
That's how they feel. Like just because you don't like somebody, and you don't like whatever beliefs she has, whatever she represents as a person, and the dudishness of it. It's an American citizen, right? You want your country to get you back from a hostile. She is being used because of political. She had a little bit of pot on her or something, right? And they were holding her as a political statement. I don't know why she would go to. It was a bad time to go to Russia. But you want to get back American citizens, whether you like it. What if the Democrats didn't bring back you because you're a truther or a Republican or something, right? Like you just can't. You want your government to retrieve your citizens.
Her sneakers during the national anthem, right? And we got her back, and they got the best. And I'm not saying he's a nice human being, but he was the #1 arms dealer in the world for a long time. But Iran was on the verge of bankruptcy. They had no money left. They had no money.
He's rocking the American flag pin. I'm editing, this is Thursday, October 2nd. This video won't be up till the 5th, I believe. But I, wanted to add something to this. The arrogance behind Americans, and a lot of them are Republican. Democrats are at least they pretend they aren't like this, but they kind of are too. And so to think that you would say who gets to have nuclear weapons and who doesn't. America dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, but we brought atomic weaponry into the world, which would ultimately going to destroy the world because we were going to use it. People were. It was an irresponsible act. And saying, well, we had to get it before other people did. Okay, but whoever brought atomic weapons into the world was going to create a situation where they're going to be used later on, right? People don't build shit they don't use. And they've already been used already. And so America has a long list of, just atrocities. 1 million people dead in Iraq. The treatment of the native peoples here by the white peoples, the invading European countries, wiping out whole tribes of people, decimating the Native American population, destroying their culture, their way of life, right? This aggressive, hostile, evil stuff that they did, biological weapons, giving them smallpox. The Native people weren't. The Native Americans turned back. They were very aggressive and warlike people on the East Coast, and they turned back the Vikings. Right, the Vikings were kicking everybody's ass in Europe. They were like the big tough guys, and the Native Americans destroyed the Vikings, but the Vikings gave them diseases. When you're not, your immune system isn't used to certain diseases because the native peoples weren't having contact with anybody outside of America, right? And so when you go to foreign countries, you find you get sick because there's diseases that they have that their immune systems are fighting off. Your immune system isn't, doing that, right? And so they gave them smallpox, and it decimated the Native American population, gave them blankets, like as an act of goodwill. I just saw the Martin Scorsese film, Murders of the Flower Moon or something like that. Don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. And it's on Apple. And it's probably his most powerful movie. It documents just, in real life, 60 native peoples, they owned oil rights in Oklahoma. These displaced native tribes, the Osage Indians, they were placed in Oklahoma, which, of course, that happened with various. Oklahoma is just, not a nice place. I drove through there. It's one of the worst places. In the West is beautiful, has a lot of scenic views. Oklahoma isn't one of those places. And, South Dakota, they put the native peoples in land that was considered bad lands, not valuable lands. But they struck oil there, and because of that, the tribe was really rich. And white guys started to marry, white people started to marry native peoples, and then they would get the oil rights when the native person would die. And they were dying at a very young age, and they were being murdered. It's pretty brutal. And you know, it's a long ass movie, and it documents this in story form, and it's just really bad. And you know, it's the way white people have treated the native peoples. It just happened. And so, you know, we don't have any claim of superiority. America doesn't. By the way that we've acted, like we're no better than any country. Like we're not the heroes. We're not the good guys. We're, you know, we've done evil shit, and we're doing evil shit right now all over the world to secure our resources. And so for Trump to come out and say, you know, Iran is somehow worse than America, you know, these, you know, all this stuff, it's just, you know, fundamentally wrong. I'll talk about this more at the end of the video. You know, the consensus is, I mean, J.D. Vance is a much better debater. And this guy is a bozo. He's a bumbling idiot. But I didn't know he said this. Well, let's show you.
You previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it's only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look,
he became friends with school shooters.
with school shooters. I've friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was an NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety.
Okay, so you did it for political reasons, not because of all that stuff you just said. But he says this thing, he's friends with school shooters. My God, bro. Wall said he used to keep his gun in the back of his car so he could go pheasant hunting after overseeing high school football practices. He's a big pheasant hunter. But he's just a putz. Like, he's just sucks. Like, he's, you know, he's another gaff magnet. Like, he lies and then he makes up gaffes and he does these things. He has real problems. My wife just texted me and said I spelled Israel wrong in the video I made public, I guess, yesterday. So, it's weirdly spelled because it's A before E. Yeah, just another problem there. But he's a gaff maggot. He's another Joe Biden. I said he's Kamala's Joe Biden. He just makes his wife's weird. He's weird. He makes bad decisions. He's got a big frowny face, and he just he misspeaks all the time. So here, J.D. Vance reacts to the gaff.
Well, it is great to be in the great state of Michigan once again. Woo! It is great to be at an incredible manufacturing firm, Visioneering. And it is great to be in the state that I think is going to be pivotal to giving us 270 electoral votes and making Donald Trump the next president of the United States.
Michigan.
Now, it's hard to believe, but we've only got 33 days until the election.
33.
Now, that's a good news, bad news situation because that means we've got a very limited amount of time to
reclaim America.
Make our case to the American people that Donald Trump ought to be reelected president. But the good news is that means only 33 more days for Kamala Harris to gaslight and lie to the American people, and that's a pretty good thing.
Woo! No enthusiasm here.
Now, we of course had a debate last night, a vice presidential debate. I thought it went pretty well.
Yeah, he's gloating because the other guy sucked, you know.
Now, it's funny because, you know, we did this debate, and then I talked to the president afterwards, and we talked a little bit about, you know, what actually happened and, you know, some of the points that I made, some of the points that Governor Walz made. And, you know, he made this observation. He said that Tim Walz said that he was friends with school shooters twice.
Twice? Did he do it twice?
And that's something I actually didn't notice that Tim Walz had said that on the debate stage. And I said, did he really say that, sir? And he said, I'm telling you, man, go and watch the clips. He said he was friends with school shooters twice. And I said that was probably only the third or fourth dumbest comment Tim Walz made that night then. Because look,
So, you know, I thought this would be more brutal about it. But, you know, he made gaffes. I can't believe he did it twice. I have to go find the other one now. So, let's go do that. Okay, so I couldn't find the second one. I only found one time he said it. I don't know if there's. I searched for it, and I think Trump is the one who said that he said it twice, which is totally Trump, right? Like if he did say it twice, then great. But if he didn't, then Trump just made that shit up, right? Okay, so I wanted to say something a little bit more about Iran. There was this guy who was from Iran who was at the ashram in Chennai, India. So my family and I were there from 2012 to 2015. We were in and out of the country for a 3-year period. There's people who were living there. This guy had a business visa, and he was struggling because, he had to show that he made his business made like $400,000 in like 3 years, like some crazy thing. And he was a guy who did, he was almost like a motivational speaker. And the guy was just great. Like he was just a saintly person. He had a great public speaking voice. And I remember my family and I were going through something. I think we had the visa crisis, and we were kind of panicked about it or whatever. And, people were like, all around us were like, oh my God, it's so bad, like this kind of thing. And he just came in and he just said, no, this is what you have to do. And, he was just like a calming presence, right? Just like a great person. And, he wanted Native American movies. I have a sort of a, connection to the Native American culture. I've talked about this before. Like when I was a kid, I used to root for the Indians in movies and, things like this. I have a, some sort of past life association with Native Americans, as does the third master of the system, Chargy. Like he could remember like trees and stuff that were around when he lived in America as a Native American. And so this guy wanted some movies, and I had some things. I had this one. There's a Native American miniseries, and it's about a grandfather and his son, is his grandson. And they're traveling to some like powwow or something, and he's teaching the kid to be a storyteller. Like there's these people who are like in the tribe who are storytellers, and he's telling them all these stories, right? And they illustrate the stories. It's kind of neat. I like I thought it was well done. And so I bring that to him, and he gives me an Iranian movie, right? And I watched the movie, and I like these foreign movies. I'm not big into reading subtitles, but I like things that speak to a culture, and we get a sense how some of the differences in the way people think about their lives, and the cultures are so different, and people are their orientation, the way they perceive the world, and the lens they see the world is very different. And so I'm watching this Iranian movie, and there's a lot of running around. There's a kid involved. There's a ginger. Like the Iranian people are light skinned, they're not white, but they're light skinned. And there's a ginger there, some guy with freckles. I don't know if he's the villain. He seems to be like chaos. And there's no plot. They're just I'm not understanding. This is like an award-winning movie there, and it made no sense to me. Like I can't tell you what the movie's about. I mean, I read the subtitles or whatever it was dubbed. I can't remember. But I'm like, this thing is like awful. Like there's just no story here. There's no point to it. I'm not even sure if it's a comedy or a drama or like I don't have any idea what this movie is, right? And this guy raved about it. Like he raved about like it being like his favorite movie of all time, like some crazy, like one of the best movies Ryan has ever produced. And I'm like, I don't even understand this, right? And this guy and I mean, somebody I could have conversations about, and we had, there was some kind of connection there, and we understood each other, and like I valued the guy's opinion. I thought he was a good solid practitioner of the Sizemore system, and he was a good person, smart person, a successful person, right? But I could not understand how he could watch this movie and said it was good. Like it was like might as well just like have thrown random pictures up on. I mean, there's just nothing there like that would make the thing anything that would resemble something I would call a movie, right? And there's these cultural differences. You see it now. They release a lot of these movies now on Netflix and Hulu and these places where they're taking foreign movies and they're putting them out there like the best of these foreign movies, or these TV shows. And when you watch them, there are clear differences in what they think is quality entertainment and just the way they interact with each other, these various cultures. I don't know if you ever saw that. They did the American Idol like a world idol. And, you know, the songs that people think are good, the singers that each country presented were so much different. You know, it's valued from culture to culture. You know, and these cultures have things that they're offended by. Like when, you know, we were told that if you point your feet at somebody, if somebody's talking to you, you're sitting across from them, and then you extend your legs and you point your feet at an Indian person, they take it, you know, when you're pointing the bottom of your soles at them, it's like you're saying you're dirt that I walk on. It's like it's offensive. Like every culture has these things, these idiosyncratic things. Their ways of greeting each other, their traditions, there's ways of socializing. And I don't value any of that stuff. Like I don't value it here in America. I don't value it in other countries. You know, these taboos and just, you know, just the superstitious crap that these, you know, all these countries have. Everybody has them. And to be a person dealing with that, you have to be a nuanced person. You know, and I get it, but I'm not. Like I don't, you know, I'm not good at adapting to those things even here in America. Like I don't adapt to social norms here in America. So like why would I do that in other countries, right? Like you have to some extent, but you know, like I just wouldn't be good at being a ambassador or negotiator in these things. And Trump is one of the worst because he doesn't respect people. He doesn't even respect Americans. And, you know, he's just a complete, you know, nightmare of a person, right? Arrogant and you know, egotistical in ways that, you know, exceeds the average amount of ego and narcissism that you see in just, you know, people in general. And so Trump is a disaster in those areas. He doesn't understand other people's point of view, and he's, you know, totally myopic in his approach to life. You know, these other people, they all suck, but they have handlers and they belong into a system. And, you know, whether that system is good or any of those things, it's, you know, it's a system, right? Whether it's effective or not. And it is a system that works in the other framework of the government here and the other governments around the world. And I kind of liked, I found it entertaining that Trump was blowing all that stuff up. But he's good at destroying things, but he sucks. He's a guy who's a failure. He goes bankrupt. He's not successful. You know, he's a flim-flam man. He's a con artist. He's a grifter. And so, yeah, that's kind of funny to watch him do that, but, you know, it's like he destroyed the world. I mean, it's literally, you know, the world's going, I mean, either way, the system's collapsing. But, you know, Trump is just a nightmare. And saying things like obliterate those countries, you can't say shit like that. You just can't. And it, you know, it's not fair to that country and the people that live there. And, you know, it represents a myopic point of view that the rest of the world would not want to have coming out of somebody who is in charge of the most powerful military and best economy in the world, right? The self-centeredness and lack of, you know, nuance in his ability to perceive these things, you know. So there were people that would meet from different countries, and maybe they would have a past life or something together, and they would get married in the Sajmark system. You know, they meet at these gatherings, and people would be attracted to each other, and almost all the marriages sucked. And Master Charji, like Western people would go to him and want him to arrange a marriage, like he'd do for Indians, and he said, "I'm not doing that anymore," because every marriage he arranged was a nightmare, and you know, because people are used to the way they do it in their country, and they didn't have faith in him or the system, and they didn't like losing control over their own, you know, bad choices to pick people, right? So, you know, they didn't have the proper attitude to pull that off because culturally they didn't have it. And he wouldn't allow, or he would dissuade people from marrying like Western people and Indians particularly, because the cultures were so different. And it was the cultural leap that you have to go through. You know, marriage and things and relationships are tough enough, but it's not that just the idea of language. You don't have any shared experiences. And that's why when you have, you know, people who date people 10, 15, 20 years younger than them, you know, Kamala Harris and that guy, you're talking about sometimes 2 generations, maybe even 3 generations of difference. Like your life, my life, growing up as Generation X, it's different from boomers, and certainly different from Generation Z and these kids growing up today. And so our experience and our way that we perceive you know, just life in general, and just over periods of time and generations, the way things change and technology has changed things, especially now. But then you go globally, and so the differences are being magnified. I mean, that's the point of this whole thing. And it's the differences that people have with each other that are accentuated when things go south and things break down. You know, people look for people who are like them. You know, birds of a feather flock together. And that certainly can be, you know, based in your racial identity or your cultural identity, but also, you know, just your, you know, your political leanings. And so that's what's happening now. Like, the divisions are getting more exacerbated, and commonality is, you know, on its way out. Like, people can't find common ground. And so this is another reason why the system's collapsing. I get into this in the voiceover for my next video. But let me wrap this one up here. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Parvado, definitely important for the apocalypse. And the ascension, everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.